It started like any normal school day. The halls were loud between classes, lockers slammed shut, and teachers were already complaining about students being late. No one noticed anything wrong until the intercom crackled on in the middle of third period. At first, the announcement was calm, almost routine. The principal said the school was going into lockdown due to a situation in the area. Teachers were instructed to lock their doors and continue teaching. Most students barely reacted. Lockdowns happen sometimes. Usually it was nothing. But this time felt different. The teacher didn't continue the lesson. Instead, she walked quickly to the door, locked it, and pulled the blinds shut. Her hands were shaking. She turned off the lights and told everyone to move to the corner of the room, away from the door. That's when the second announcement came on. This time the voice was tense. No one was allowed to leave their classroom for any reason. The doors were not to be opened. There was no mention of a drill. Outside in the hallway, something heavy hit the lockers. The sound echoed down the corridor like metal being slammed with force. A few students laughed nervously, thinking it was just another kid messing around. Then there was a scream. It was short, sharp, and immediately cut off. Every single person in the room froze. Minutes passed in silence. Phones buzzed quietly as students texted their parents. No one got a reply. The teacher whispered for everyone to stay quiet. Suddenly, footsteps could be heard running down the hall. Not fast like someone trying to escape, but slow and deliberate. Each step stopped directly outside their classroom door. The handle rattled. Someone on the other side tried the door once, then again. When it didn't open, the footsteps moved on. The sound of doors being tested continued down the hallway one by one. Somewhere far away, glass shattered. Another scream followed, this one louder, filled with panic. The intercom came on again, but this time no one spoke. All that came through was heavy breathing before the signal cut out completely. Students started crying silently. One of them dropped their phone, and it hit the floor louder than expected. Everyone flinched. The teacher mouthed for them to stay still. Outside, the footsteps stopped again. They were right outside the room. There was a long pause. Then something scraped slowly against the door, like metal dragging across painted wood. Whoever it was didn't speak. They didn't shout. They just stood there, waiting. After what felt like hours, but was really only minutes, distant sirens could finally be heard. The footsteps retreated. The scraping stopped. Eventually, police voices echoed through the halls, shouting commands. Only then were teachers instructed to unlock their doors. When the students were finally escorted outside, they saw the damage. Blood smeared across the hallway tiles. Lockers dented inward like they'd been hit repeatedly. One classroom door had deep gouges carved into it, right where students would have been hiding behind it. Later, they learned the truth. A former student had entered the school during the day, armed and looking for specific classrooms. He never said a word. He just walked to the halls, testing doors, trying to get in. The only reason more people weren't hurt was because most doors had been locked in time. To this day, the students who were there say the same thing. The scariest part wasn't the lockdown itself. It wasn't the screams or the police lights. It was the silence in the hallway. The sound of footsteps stopping outside your door and knowing that if it hadn't been locked, someone would have come in. The lockdown began without warning. There was no announcement over the intercom, no explanation, no drill code. Teachers only noticed something was wrong when a message appeared on their classroom phones instructing them to lock their doors immediately and turn off the lights. Within seconds, the normal noise of the school vanished. Hallways that had been loud just moments before went completely silent. Inside one classroom, the teacher quickly shut the door, twisted the lock, and pulled the blinds down so hard one of them snapped loose. She told the students to get to the back corner of the room and stay low. Her voice shook as she spoke. That's when the intercom finally clicked on. The principal's voice was quiet, controlled, but clearly strained. The school was now in full lockdown. This was not a drill. At first, no one understood why. Then the sound came. Something heavy slammed into a locker somewhere down the hall. The metal rang out sharply, echoing through the building. A few students flinched. Someone whispered that it was probably nothing. Then it happened again. Louder this time, closer. The teacher motioned for everyone to stay silent. Phones buzzed softly as students tried to text parents, but messages wouldn't send. Footsteps followed. Slow, measured, not running, not panicked, just steady steps moving from classroom to classroom. Each time the footsteps stopped, a door handle rattled. One door, then the next, then the next. The person in the hallway never spoke. They didn't shout or threaten. They simply tested doors. If one didn't open, they moved on. When a door was locked, something sharp scraped across it, leaving long, deliberate marks in the wood. Students could hear it clearly through the thin walls. Some covered their mouths to stop themselves from crying. One student vomited quietly into a backpack. Suddenly, a scream erupted from farther down the hall. It wasn't quick. It was long, terrified, and filled with pain. It ended abruptly, cut off mid-breath. The teacher pressed her back against the door as if her body alone could keep it shut. No one moved. No one breathed. The footsteps stopped outside their room. The handle turned once, then again. The lock held. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then the scraping began. Slow, intentional. Whatever was being used dragged across the door just inches from where students were hiding. The sound carved itself into their memory. The scraping stopped, but the footsteps didn't move away. Whoever was outside stayed there, standing still, listening. Then, just as suddenly, the footsteps retreated. Minutes passed, maybe longer. No one knew. Time felt distorted. Eventually, distant sirens could be heard through the walls. The footsteps disappeared completely. Police voices echoed faintly through the building, shouting commands. When officers finally opened the classroom door, students spilled out shaking and crying. The hallway looked nothing like it had earlier that day. Lockers were dented inward. Doors were scratched and gouged. Blood streaked across the tile floor, smeared by hurried footsteps. Later, investigators confirmed what had happened. A former student had entered the school carrying weapons and a list of classrooms. He moved slowly, methodically, checking doors, listening for sound. The lockdown had been called just minutes before he reached most of them. Several people were injured. Some classrooms weren't locked in time. Years later, those who survived still say the same thing. The most terrifying part wasn't knowing someone was inside the school. It was hearing them stop outside your door and realizing that silence was the only thing keeping you alive. The lockdown didn't begin with an announcement. It began with confusion. Teachers' phones buzzed almost simultaneously with a single message. Lock your door, turn off the lights. This is not a drill. No explanation followed. In the hallway outside, students were still moving between classes, unaware that anything was wrong. Inside one classroom, the teacher froze for half a second before reacting. She shut the door, twisted the lock, and flipped the lights off. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped the keys. She whispered for the students to get to the back of the room and stay low. Someone asked what was happening. She didn't answer. Then the intercom came on. The principal's voice sounded thin, like he was trying not to panic. He announced a full lockdown and told everyone to remain where they were. Halfway through the message, the audio cut out. No follow-up came. At first, there was silence. Then something slammed into a locker. The sound echoed violently down the hallway, metal crashing against metal. A few students jumped. Someone tried to laugh it off, but their voice cracked. The teacher raised a finger to her lips. Everyone went still. Another impact followed. This one closer. Footsteps began moving down the hall. They weren't hurried. They weren't frantic. They were slow and controlled, stopping every few feet. Each time they stopped, a door handle rattled. If the door didn't open, the footsteps continued to the next room. Phones buzzed quietly as students tried to text their parents. Messages wouldn't send. One student's phone slipped from their hands and hit the floor. The sound felt deafening. Everyone flinched. The footsteps stopped outside their classroom. The handle turned once, then again. The lock held. But whoever was outside didn't move away. Something scraped across the door, slowly, deliberately, like metal being dragged against wood. Long scratches formed just inches from where the students were crouched. No one cried out. No one moved. Down the hall, a scream erupted. It was loud, raw, and full of terror. It echoed once before cutting off completely. The silence that followed was worse than the scream itself. The teacher pressed her body against the door. Her face had gone pale. She whispered for everyone to stay quiet, no matter what they heard. The scraping stopped. The footsteps remained. For several seconds, whoever was outside simply stood there listening. Then the steps retreated, slow and measured, continuing down the hall. Minutes passed. Or maybe it was longer. Time no longer made sense. Every sound felt amplified. Every breath felt dangerous. Then, faintly, sirens could be heard in the distance. The footsteps disappeared. Eventually, voices shouted commands through the hallways. Police announced themselves and ordered doors to be opened. When the classroom door finally unlocked, students stumbled out, some crying, some unable to speak at all. The hallway was destroyed. Lockers were dented inward. Doors were carved with deep gouges. Blood streaked across the floor, smeared by frantic movement. Later, investigators explained what had happened. A former student had entered the building with weapons and a list of classrooms. He moved methodically, checking doors, listening for noise. The lockdown had been called just minutes before he reached most of them. Some doors weren't locked in time. Years later, survivors still say the same thing. The worst part wasn't knowing someone was inside the school. It was hearing them stop outside your door and realizing that silence was the only thing keeping you alive.